talking! Stop! Turn around!
You're under arrest for the meeting time, okay? Suspicion of murder for an incident which occurred in Salford, alright?
There's a bomb inside it, but it's not live. What is it? What's it made from?
Pressure cooker.
A pressure cooker. And what's in it?
It's not live. Gunpowder.
There's gunpowder in a pressure cooker.
You're probably already familiar with the cases, respectively, of Kyle Clifford and Nicholas Prosper, two savage triple murderers whose totally stupid reasons for killing I'll duly be sharing, and whose prison sentences were announced in March 2025. But you're probably a lot less familiar with the story of the 20-year-old women-hating criminology student who got 39 years for his murderous acts, and the case of the prisoner who murdered someone the very day that he was freed under Starmer's early release scheme. Now, sit back, brace yourself, and get on this journey to a body buried in a garden that came courtesy of a homicidal wife, a man who got on a bus carrying a number of plastic shopping bags that contained his former flatmate, and a 29-year-old healthcare professional who got 37 years despite not having laid a finger on anyone. Now viewer, if I've got you hooked on the story so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you.
Down in front of you. Being time, you're detained for the purpose of a search while we ascertain your identity, okay?
Police group, give us a call please.
Can you double check please?
Blast the box drop for a van,
It's
please.
definitely a mistake. 100%.
I know, I appreciate that. It's 12 minutes past 1, it's minute time, you're under arrest for suspicion of murder. Do you understand the offence? You're under arrest for the meeting time, okay? Suspicion of murder for an incident which occurred in Salford, alright? So you were taken to police station for question regarding that.
Okay, I go with you and I answer any questions.
Yeah, alright.
On the 4th of April 2024, the lower torso and the thighs belonging to 67-year-old retiree Stewart Ahearne from Wolseley, Manchester, were found in a disused building in Curzaldale Wetlands. 3 weeks later, as a result of none other than a chance encounter, 42-year-old Marcin Majerkiewicz was arrested on suspicion of Mr. Ahearne's murder. The suspect was apprehended by the police on a bus in front of all the other passengers.
So it's a white male, he's wearing a dark or black coloured beanie hat with what looks like an orange logo on it, a dark grey jacket, lighter grey bottoms, carrying some kind of grey bag for life and black trainers.
Mike, I got one matching that description. Down in front of you. Being time, you're detained for the purpose of a search while we ascertain your identity, okay?
Or if you could pass me your mobile number for
Just one stand up first.
Money. That was why, on the 27th of March 2024, the perpetrator battered his housemate, who was also his close friend, to death, then chopped his body into small pieces, which he then scattered all over North Manchester and Salford, Salford being the location of Curzaldale. Having come to the UK from Poland in his 20s and having had no criminal record before he butchered his roommate, Majerkiewicz had worked for many years as a fast food restaurant manager in Manchester's Trafford Centre. He was actually well liked at work as well. Majerkiewicz was an important presence in the lives of his two sons, one 11 years old, one 13, and got on great with their mother, a woman called Agnes. After his breakup with Agnes, which came in 2017, Majerkiewicz went to live in a house share in Wolseley Road, Wolseley, where he joined Stewart Ahearne and a second roommate by the name, sorry if I mispronounce it, of Michael Polchowski. Did Majerkiewicz and Mr. Ahearne become lovers? Majerkiewicz never made any objection when Mr. Ahearne referred to him, to his family and friends, as his partner. They'd watch TV in each other's rooms and were very, very close, and I think they used to have sex with one another as well, at one point at least. The very judge of the murder trial suggested that as a strong possibility, you see, but yes, he could very well be mistaken. By the time Majerkiewicz did away with his housemate, he was in £14,000 of credit card debt, owed Mr. Ahearne, who rented the house from a landlord and then sublet the rooms, 3 months' rent, and, having quit in November 2023, what turned out to be his last job, had spent the 60,000 quid that he had taken out in loans between September and October 2023. I couldn't trace why the man got into all that debt, or why he left his job at what had to be the worst time for him to be without any income. I think it's clear, however, that by the time of his act against Mr. Everett, Majerkiewicz felt financially cornered. Knowing Mr. Everett as intimately as he did, Majerkiewicz was clearly under the impression that his housemate had enough in savings to make killing him worthwhile. Having a tattoo of the character of Jason from the horror slasher film Friday the 13th, Majerkiewicz was a massive fan of gore and extreme violence. In order to kill his housemate, Majerkiewicz whacked him 4 times on the back of the head with nothing less than a hammer. He struck his victim so hard that the poor man's skull caved in. The perpetrator had brought the knife and the hacksaw with which he promptly dismembered his victim's body beforehand, specifically for that purpose. He had a few blades as backup tools to hand as well. For hacking Mr. Everett's face off his head, as he disgustingly did, the judge of the murder trial basically called Majerkiewicz a sick, stupid fucker, protesting what he considered the enthusiasm with which the perpetrator had chopped his friend's body up.
I should say that though the way in which you behaved in the aftermath of Stewart Everett's death showed an extremely distasteful willingness, and perhaps even enthusiasm, to butcher his body, I cannot be sure that the murder itself involved sexual or sadistic conduct.
Mr. Justice Kavanagh, the judge, stated that the perpetrator's motive for literally chopping Mr. Everett's face off was to try to make it impossible for his victim's identity to be traced. The perpetrator had, therefore, somehow never heard of DNA. Having chopped Mr. Everett's body into several small pieces, the perpetrator then proceeded to make several trips spread over a number of days to dump the pieces in areas of North Manchester and Salford. He went on the said dumping trips, sometimes on foot, sometimes by bus, and, shockingly enough, he usually carried the body parts in open bags, some made of plastic, some made of cloth. There was one occasion, shockingly enough again, when, straight after ditching a set of Mr. Everett's remains, the perpetrator went and treated himself to KFC. The man just dumped the body parts in parks and woodlands where, as you can see, they could easily be found, as indeed they were. The police attended the said abandoned building in the Curzaldale woodland on the 4th of April 2024 after getting notice on that day from a member of the public as to what was to be found there. Only about a third of Mr. Everett's body was recovered by the police. Bits of skull here and there, for instance. On this point, the devastation that Mr. Everett's family would have felt on learning what had become of the victim's body, this coming on top, of course, of their shock, indignation and sadness over his savage killing, was in fact another element of Majerkiewicz's offending for which the perpetrator was again blasted in court.
You acted in an almost unbelievably cold-blooded and macabre way, and showed complete disrespect and contempt for your friend's remains. This denied dignity to Stewart Everett even in death, and greatly increased the pain suffered by Stewart Everett's family when the murder came to light.
Shortly after killing his housemate, Majerkiewicz set about covering up the copious bloodstaining on his bedroom carpet and got rid of the murder weapon. Next, he informed Mr. Polchowski, his remaining housemate, his landlord and a neighbour that Mr. Everett had suffered a stroke and was now in hospital, and then that he had moved to Derby, his hometown where all his immediate family still lived, or to a different part of Manchester. As you must have gathered, the perpetrator had thought through, well in advance, how to explain his victim's sudden disappearance. I should tell you at this point that 67-year-old Mr. Everett, a lifelong heavy smoker who had actually suffered a stroke a few years before, who needed a walking stick to move around, and who was quite substantially overweight, was inevitably in very poor health. That said, the former civil servant was nothing if not full of life. He was close to his 3 siblings, had a wide circle of friends, and liked his nights out at pubs and clubs. With Mr. Everett now dead, The perpetrator immediately took over his bank accounts, spending from them at will, but actually not spending a large amount of the money. He also sent notice to various companies and organisations that he was moving away. Most despicably and intrusively by far though, I'd say, was the perpetrator's subterfuge against Mr. Everett's family. Majerkiewicz messaged his victim's 2 brothers and 1 sister to say, in his role as his victim, that he was ill and couldn't speak to them. He next told them that he was moving house, faking video messages where he showed them around his new home. He sent a birthday card and birthday wishes to Mr. Everett's family members, again in role as Mr. Everett, and responded to their birthday wishes to Mr. Everett, likewise as if he were him. As you can see, all the actions from the perpetrator that I've just described were the killer's strategy for creating the impression that his victim was still alive, this strategy enabling him, as shown, to live off his victim's money too. The perpetrator also notified the landlord that all 3 housemates were moving out, then told Mr. Polchowski that the landlord had given the 2 of them notice to quit. After removing all of Mr. Everett's possessions from the house and having them carted away, he told Mr. Polchowski that their housemate's family had come and collected the man's things for the man. The perpetrator's whole cover-up exercise took about a month. It had more or less come to an end on the 25th of April 2024, this having been the day on which he had planned to move out permanently from the house in Wolseley Road. The thing is, by nothing more than a stroke of luck, he got busted that same day. In some CCTV footage of the Curzaldale woodland that had been recorded on the 2nd of April 2024, murder investigators had seen a man carrying into the woodland what seemed to be an extremely heavy bag. On re-emerging about 10 minutes later, the man was carrying the bag which he had folded in one hand. On the 25th of April 2024, a plainclothes police officer happened to pass a man on a road in Salford who looked just like the man in the footage. And sure enough, about 10 minutes after the officer reported this to her uniformed colleagues, Majerkiewicz, who was indeed the man in the surveillance footage, was sitting in cuffs at a bus stop being placed under arrest on suspicion of murder. In his sentencing of Majerkiewicz, Mr. Justice Kavanagh stated that he was in no doubt that the perpetrator's intention was to relocate to Spain, using Mr. Everett's money, in the hope that his offending would never be discovered, or, at the very least, that he would never be traced. As regards the perpetrator's planned use of Mr. Everett's savings, the judge asserted that the only reason that Majerkiewicz hadn't actually spent a large sum of his victim's money was that he was arrested before he could do so. The perpetrator's internet searches for properties to rent in Alicante, East Spain, were, of course, evidence of the man's plans to flee the country. At no point, from the moment of his arrest to the moment of his sentencing, did Majerkiewicz show remorse for killing his housemate. On the 28th of March 2025, the perpetrator got life with a minimum of 34 years. If he survives those 34 years and then applies for parole, let's hope that the parole board tells him to fuck off and denies his request for parole.
Keep walking! Stop! Turn around! Walk backwards! Turn ahead! Walk backwards towards my voice! Walk backwards! Keep walking! Keep walking! Bring him out. Out! Come out! Get on your knees! Down on your knees! Down on your knees! Look at me! Stay there. Do not move.
Explain all of it.
I've seen you're under arrest on suspicion of murder.
Sexual frustration coupled with the acute, long-held anger springing from that. These are the reasons why, on the 24th of May 2024, 20-year-old criminology student Nasen Saadi from Croydon, South London, murdered 34-year-old Amy Gray and attempted to murder her friend, 38-year-old Leanne Miles. Amy and Leanne were 2 complete strangers to their attacker and, in line with that, were 2 wholly innocent victims. Born in 2003 and raised in a Buddhist household, Saadi has never had a girlfriend and has never had sex, and these two statuses of his stem, I think it's safe to say, from his open and lifelong contempt for women and girls. At school, nobody liked the boy, and he was, as such, a social outcast. His derogatory comments against women, including that all women are weak and worthless and don't deserve to engage with certain work roles like policing, were amongst the things that he said and did that earned him the dislike of just about everyone. The fact that the man could never get a girlfriend, no matter how hard he tried, triggered a devastating self-esteem crisis inside of him, which only served to transform his abject contempt for the opposite sex into a searing hatred for it. With that hatred for women and girls, which came, as I say, from his, virginity? Saadi was an incel, an involuntary celibate. I'll leave you to look up the murderous acts committed by Elliot Rodger from California, USA in 2014 and by Jake Davison from Plymouth, UK in 2021 if you need any further examples of men who kill just because they can't get their leg over. There being, sadly, so many more examples of such men than those two. At the time of his disgusting acts against Amy and Leanne, the perpetrator was studying criminology and criminal psychology at Greenwich University in South London, and sinking deeper and deeper into the disturbing darkness of extreme violence. Not only did he usually spend lectures watching graphic videos, he also had a habit of asking his lecturers about self-defense claims in murder cases and the longevity of DNA, even when those two things had nothing to do with the topic of the lecture. When evaluating a crime case, Saadi would invariably begin by offering a defence of the criminal in question. When, on one occasion, he asked his lecturer, Dr. Lisa Maria Rees, quote, "How can I get away with murder?" unquote, Dr. Rees responded by asking him, quote, "You're not planning a murder, are you?" unquote. Ha! If only she'd known. In that same conversation with Dr. Rees, the perpetrator asked how forensic evidence was captured and shared, how the police are able to trace a killer, and whether the different police forces in the UK exchange case information and evidence with one another. Again, none of these questions was related to the topic of the lecture that he just had. I don't know what answers Dr. Rees gave, or whether the police would have been able to act in some way if she'd reported Saadi to them. But if you're wishing she'd gone to the police anyway, you're not the only one. Shortly after this conversation with Dr. Rees, Saadi bought the 6 knives that were later found in a search of his home by the police, taking care to buy each one from a different seller so as not to arouse suspicion. He then started looking up whether he could pay for an Airbnb with cash, or, if not, whether credit card payments could be traced, which UK beaches tended to be busy, whether people went to beaches at night, whether it was easier to run on pebbles as opposed to on sand, and how busy Bournemouth Beach typically became. This was all in April 2024, the perpetrator having looked up the month before, quote, "Why is it harder for a killer to be caught if he does it in another town?" unquote, and having since come to the conclusion that killing far away from where he lived would afford him the greatest chance of avoiding capture. Having since settled on Bournemouth as the town where he would fulfil his disgusting plan, in the middle of May, Saadi booked a Travelodge for the 21st and the 22nd of May and the Silver Howe Hotel for the 23rd and the 24th of May, having satisfied himself through his fucked up research that those two hotels had no operational CCTV cameras. On this point, after arriving in Bournemouth on the 21st of May, the man spent the next 3 days taking a number of walks up and down the promenade to see where the CCTV cameras were located, in order, of course, to identify the best location for what he had in mind. At around 11:20 p.m. on the 24th of May, dressed all in black and wearing the hooded top that he had worn every day of this murder trip of his so far, no matter how hot it got, Saadi, who'd been strolling along Daily Chime Beach, pounced. Amy Gray, 34, and her friend Leanne Miles, 38, are sitting beside a fire that they've lit on Daily Chime Beach, chatting, chilling and enjoying the moment. It's approximately 11:20 p.m. on the 24th of May 2024. Amy is a beloved wife, mother and daughter. She's also a carer for her 90-year-old grandmother, who sadly has Alzheimer's disease. Having recently been made head coach of Dorset Futsal, a women's football team, Amy's is a life of contentment with so much to look forward to. She's now dead, however, because there was nothing that paramedics could do about the 10 stab wounds to the chest that she suffered only minutes before. Dying at the scene, she had basically sacrificed herself for her friend, who the attacker had stabbed first, only to stop and attack her after she bravely yelled at him to leave Leanne alone. Nobody had seen the attack or heard the screams made by the two victims, since there was nobody else in sight. Leanne, meanwhile, has suffered no fewer than 20 stabs to her back, one of which having punctured a lung. It was only when she screamed to the attacker that she had children that the man stopped chasing after her and stabbing her, such as he had been doing, and then immediately took flight. I have no idea how Leanne was able to run from the attacker, first with the initial stab wounds that the man had inflicted on her, and then with the said further 20 stab wounds that he also inflicted on her. But like you, I am just so glad she did. She was subsequently rushed to hospital, members of the public having soon seen her and all the blood dripping from her, and having duly called the emergency services. 4 days after his acts against Amy and Leanne, Saadi was arrested on suspicion of Amy's murder and of Leanne's attempted murder, and having genuinely believed until that point that he had got away with what he'd done, he was clearly gutted. In his police interview, the perpetrator appeared to remain calm and offered what he clearly considered powerful counters to the evidence against him that officers showed him. His speaking was notably slow, his voice itself was markedly weak, hardly sounding confident and composed then, and far from outsmarting the detectives as he thought he could with his knowledge of criminology, the perpetrator fell flat on his stupid face.
Said this is about us getting answers, finding the truth, yeah? It's about trying to establish how Amy died, how Leanne was attacked, and why. There's lots of things here that indicate that you are the person responsible.
And I'm not responsible.
Okay.
And I have no reason to attack someone for no reason.
Have you been motivated by something else?
No comment. I wouldn't attack someone for no reason.
So, but do you understand what I mean? Is there something else going on that will be an explanation as to what's then happened?
No comment.
Your interests?
That's related to my university. So
Your views towards females?
No comment.
So I really think you've got some important information here. You've got some answers here that can help us deal with what's taken place.
I haven't got any.
So now I think we are getting to the point where, do you think there's anything we've not talked about or asked you about that's important that you need to tell us?
I'm just saying I'm wrongly accused of mistaken identity.
Okay.
And mistakes can happen, and I'm just not responsible.
Okay. Is there anything you think we haven't understood?
I think just because someone is wearing the same clothes is circumstantial.
And having thought about what we've talked about or what we've just said, are you prepared to tell us things like where the clothing is that you were wearing that night?
No comment.
What we've seen you wearing on the previous nights?
I have no comment.
The rest of your belongings or possessions are?
No comment.
And crucially, where you were, because it's a very quick inquiry to confirm where you were, to prove or disprove whether you were the person we're saying has moved along the beach and done this attack.
Well, I left Bournemouth on the 25th on like 9 o'clock.
Yeah, we know that, but we're just trying to establish where you were between 11 and midnight. And that will really assist. What's preventing you telling us that?
No comment.
I think what's preventing you is the fact that, as the evidence shows, you are the male that is responsible for the murder and an attempted murder. You were on the beach that night.
But beaches are like popular places. Many people on the CCTV that you showed me. There were many like people walking. It's not just one person.
But were you that one person we saw?
No.
So we'll check a few bits. You mean, you've just told us then, haven't you, about the whole going back on the 25th? Is there anything else you can tell us about what else you were doing on the 24th and 25th?
Well, I was back home on the 25th, but I can't remember anything after.
After what?
I got home.
Okay. But yesterday you couldn't remember anything after the beach at Thursday afternoon?
No.
But we've been able to recall some more information about your movement on the the Friday morning. Nisa and shop, Superdrug. We've managed to establish some more memories about your movement on the beach where this incident happened at 4:30. Yeah? You remember being on the train, wearing the hat and the sunglasses. So, fill in those other blanks. You can't, can you?
No.
And the reason you can't is because the blanks are, you were the male we've just seen on that CCTV that's been identified as being responsible for what's happened to Leanne and to Amy.
Is that a question?
Yes.
Or a statement?
Is that something you'd like to comment on?
No.
Okay. In that case, is there anything from anyone else?
No.
Sure there's nothing you want to add or clarify?
A lesser conviction of Saadi's relates to the offence of failing to disclose the password to his mobile phone to the police. So one minute the bloke's telling the cops, it wasn't me. The next minute, little Mr. Innocent is preventing them from accessing the digital content of his mobile phone. In court, the judge said this was obviously because of the incriminating evidence held in that digital content. Saadi wanted to hurt women and to become the star of the true crime story, a story of murder, of course, that he had both written and directed. Infamy was his aim. While he was on remand at Belmarsh Prison, Saadi asked a female prison officer whether she'd heard about the Bournemouth Beach murder, what was being reported on the case, and indeed whether there had been substantial media coverage, then began to touch his cock in front of her. Having pleaded not guilty, but having stuck to his belief that he could outwit a court, Saadi barely had any recourse to legal representation. Even when he was eventually appointed a legal team, he mainly shunned them. Talk about arrogance, recklessness and stupidity. While his trial of November 2024 had been expected to last 3 weeks, it was over in only 9 days, the judge blasting the perpetrator in his sentencing hearing of the 28th of March 2025 for having put Amy's family through the pain of a trial on account of his not guilty plea. She remarked that Saadi had no prior convictions, but that he was now nothing other than a worthless piece of shit. Quote, "Why Amy Gray and Leanne Miles? Prior to your conviction, you gave no account or explanation for your actions. You made no comment in interview with the police and did not give evidence at your trial where you were convicted on overwhelming evidence. You admitted your guilt for the first time to Dr. Rothenberg, a psychiatrist who has prepared a report at the court's request for your sentence. You clearly should have pleaded guilty to these offences, avoiding the need for Ms. Miles and the families of your victims to go through the stress of a trial. Your refusal to do so shows not only a complete lack of remorse, but, in my view, also that you sought the notoriety that you hoped a trial would give you." Unquote. Attacking 2 defenceless women who were all on their own and killing one of them and trying, of course, to kill the other one. This is, if you like, a parallel case to that of that mad idiot Daniel Hussein, who murdered 2 sisters in a park in Wembley during the COVID period because he thought that the devil would then help him win the lottery. It was literally a deal with the devil. Saadi was studying criminology and criminal psychology. So was the suspect behind the 4 murders that took place in a student home in Idaho back in, I think it was October 2022. It's Brian Koberger. Saadi can apply for parole when he's 59 or 60. He got 39 years. Let those years be absolute hell for him and let him never get parole.
Maureen, hello. Hello. So the time is 12:23. Okay, so I'm placing you under arrest under suspicion of fraud.
Fraud of what?
False representation. Okay, so.
False representation of what?
So the circumstances are you're using your husband's card without permission to make purchases. Okay, so you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you're not mentioned when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
Yes, as the police stated, this woman's arrest, which came on the 11th of July 2024, was on suspicion of fraud. The woman's re-arrest, however, which took place down at the police station only hours later, was for murder. Of the 5 stab wounds that 50-year-old Maureen Rickards inflicted on her 65-year-old husband, Jeremy, in her act of taking his life, which she perpetrated in June 2024, one was so ferocious that it cut through the bone of the victim's sternum. The mother of one had, in the weeks before viciously doing away with her husband, subjected the former geologist to numerous physical attacks as well as to psychological abuse. So yes, their marriage of over a quarter of a century had long since become a total mess. Why Mrs. Rickards suddenly started bullying and battering her husband, who, according to the evidence, never once fought back, and why, around the 9th of June 2024, she then knifed the man to death remains a mystery. In court, the perpetrator offered no explanation. When she first met Jeremy in Mali in 1997, when the geologist was engaged in a project involving the mining of diamonds and gold, the perpetrator, then aged 23, already had a daughter. Jeremy loved and raised the girl, who we'll call Sandra, as his own, alongside his wife of course, and, having her privately educated, saw that she wanted for nothing. Rickards and her husband travelled the world, such as Jeremy's job required, and had some wonderful times together. But somewhere along the way, their marriage broke down. Having since settled in England, you see, in 2021, Rickards moved out of the family home and joined a distinctly chaotic house share in Canterbury, South East England, while she pursued the study of law, no less, at Christchurch University. It may be that she only moved to that new accommodation, which was in St Martin's Road, because of her studies. But yet, whenever her husband came to spend a few days with her, she used to fight him. This is known by the videos of her abuse of her husband, including her threats to kill him, that she herself filmed. Rickards, you understand, was substantially mightier than her husband, who, apart from being in his mid-60s, was in rather poor health. Jeremy would often drink alone at a nearby pub. In mid May 2024, he was seen by one of the bar staff to have bruising to his face. Then, in early June 2024, when Rickards and her husband stayed in nearby rented accommodation, several witnesses gave evidence that Jeremy had quite serious injuries to his face, including a cut or gash to his cheek. Injured and weak, the battered husband didn't change his clothes for 3 days, and the property owners themselves expressed their concerns for his welfare. When Rickards subsequently left on a visit to London, Jeremy was taken by taxi back to St Martin's Road, only to find none other than his wife back at the property. Again, at some point after then, witnesses from the house saw that Jeremy had been badly beaten, having been left with black eyes and a cauliflower ear. On the 7th of June 2024, Rickards made a video showing her beating Jeremy and mocking him, calling him British boy. In response to Jeremy's pleas for her to stop, the perpetrator said she would kill him. Exactly as she did, approximately 2 days later, the attic room of the family home being where her murderous act unravelled.
Police uncovered this recording, taken just days before his murder.
I'm gonna kill you.
After keeping Jeremy's corpse in that room for a few days, Rickards chopped it into pieces before loading it into a holdall, which she then hid in her back garden. She subsequently messaged Sandra, her daughter, to announce that the young woman's father had taken his life out in Saudi Arabia, this being a trip that he'd allegedly recently taken, and that his suicide was none other than Sandra's fault. The perpetrator's arrest for fraud that came on the 11th of July 2024 was triggered by none other than these shocking and hurtful messages of hers to her daughter. Not believing her mother's words for a minute, Sandra promptly reported her father to Kent Police as a missing person. Using her dead husband's bank cards to make purchases is why Rickards was arrested for fraud. While the perpetrator was in police custody, she was re-arrested on suspicion of murder, the police having since conducted a search of her home and having found her husband's body. In court, the judge basically called the perpetrator an evil cunt. Quote, "He was in frail health and largely defenceless against you. The pathology suggests he had been strangled and was recovering from rib fractures when he died. You told him you intended to kill him, a threat he took seriously. In the last video, he said you might kill him. You said you had Googled how to do it. He was vulnerable and frail, partly because of your mistreatment of him. In the last video, he pleaded to be taken to hospital because of his condition. In the attack itself, a knife was used. That is an aggravating feature. So is the ferocity of the attack, causing 5 stab wounds as well as other injuries. After the killing, you desecrated your husband's corpse and took steps to conceal his body and remove forensic evidence from the attic room cupboard. You must have disposed of the murder weapon, which was never found. And you disposed of Jeremy's possessions, such as his bank cards, passport, clothing, and even his wedding ring. You also deleted incriminating text messages sent by your daughter to Jeremy's phone, which was in your possession." Unquote. The sentencing hearing revealed the detail to the perpetrator's attempt to cover her tracks, which, to remind you, included the fiction that she told Sandra about her father's demise. Quote, "You concocted lies about Jeremy having left for Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and taken his own life there. You later faked messages purporting to come from him to indicate that he was in Saudi Arabia. You purchased the cleaning agents on the 20th of June using his bank card. You tried to remove the blood, but only succeeded in pushing it downwards to the underside of the carpet. On the 26th of June, you paid a local maintenance man to cut the grass and leave the grass cuttings at the back of the garden, where they would help to conceal the holdall bag containing your husband's body. On the 28th of June, you sent messages to your daughter in Kenya saying that Jeremy had died on the 9th of June. You became abusive towards your daughter, blaming her for Jeremy's death. She became very concerned about him. She contacted the Saudi Arabian authorities, who had no record of him visiting that country. She reported him to Kent Police as a missing person. They started a missing persons inquiry that led straight to you. After a visit from police officers to whom you lied, saying Jeremy was in Saudi Arabia, you were arrested on the 11th of July on suspicion of fraud because you had used his bank cards to make various purchases. While you were at the police station, police officers discovered Jeremy's decomposing body in the holdall bag. The overpowering odour made them feel ill, unquote. Never having shown any remorse for her act against her husband, on the 9th of April 2025, mad woman Maureen Rickards got 22 years, an unduly soft sentence if you ask me. This is Liam Matthews. He's 26. For most of 2024, he was in jail for violent disorder, having kicked and stamped on a man in a street fight. But on the 18th of September 2024, he was released early because of prison overcrowding. Just hours later, on the very same day that he was released, he killed this man, Lewis Bell, a man that he'd known for years and a man who used to be his friend. Matthews killed his 26-year-old victim on the 8th birthday of the man's son. In Matthews' trial of March 2025, which took place at Teesside Crown Court, North East England, the jury heard that Matthews' savage act against Mr Bell came from a dispute that unravelled in a crack you-know-what then. Believing that Mr Bell had been stealing from other customers, Matthews flew into a violent rage, triggering Mr Bell to make a speedy exit from the property in question and run for his life. Having been relentlessly chased by no fewer than 3 aggressors in fact, Mr Bell had his final moments captured on a doorbell camera in Norton-on-Hills Drive. Having ignored the victim's pleas for his life, 23-year-old Sean McLeod was convicted in March 2025 of the murder of Mr Bell, the man having perpetrated a 5-inch stab wound to Mr Bell's back, which penetrated Mr Bell's lung. Mr Bell died minutes after suffering this stab wound on account of the catastrophic blood loss that it caused him. 18-year-old Ashton White and 26-year-old Liam Matthews, meanwhile, were found guilty of manslaughter. Having served only part of his sentence for violent disorder, Matthews was released from HMP Holme House under the government's early release scheme, which was intended to free up prison spaces. On the day of his release, Matthews met with probation officers and attended an appointment at a job centre before going to a pub and then to the crack house, where he spent £130 of his savings plus his £96 prison release grant on crack you-know-what. He was arrested the day after he, along with the said 2 other perpetrators, killed Mr Bell. In a statement, the MOJ, Ministry of Justice, told one news channel, 5 News, quote, "We had no choice but to introduce an emergency early release programme. We did so with protections in place, including exclusions for those serving sentences for serious and violent crimes. Like with all serious further offences, this case will be investigated fully so that we can take action where necessary," unquote. So you excluded people from the early release scheme if they were serving sentences for serious violent crimes. I'm sorry, but isn't stamping on someone's head and kicking them in a street fight a serious and violent crime? Because, my dear Ministry of Justice, that is why Liam Matthews was fucking in prison, so why the fuck did you release him? Matthews, White and McLeod are due to be sentenced in June 2025.
In a moment, you will hear gunshots. That's the sound of 3 gangsters attempting to kill a rival.
It sure is. And hey, let's give this attempted murder case a closer look. Now, nobody could have guessed back in 2006 that the man who coordinated, shall we say, the biggest armed robbery in British history, which unravelled in Kent, South East England, in the said year, would end up getting a bullet in the neck in Woodford Green, East London, on the night of July the 11th, 2019, as he stood in the kitchen of his £1.2 million home that he was renting from comedian Russell Kane himself, or that the same bullet would sever the man's spinal cord, leaving him paralysed from the chest down. And I'm getting fucking Clifford vibes here, personally. But as for why 36-year-old Louis Ahearne, his big brother Stewart Ahearne, aged 46, and Daniel Kelly, also 46, fired 6 shots from their 9mm Glock handgun at former cage fighter and ex-armed robber Paul Allen through the man's kitchen window on the said date, nobody can say. In court, on the matter of their motive, the 3 brazen career criminals who, before their attempt on Mr Allen's life, were already wanted for their £2.7 million burglary of a Swiss museum, and who, the very day before they tried to kill Mr Allen, burgled a property in a gated community in Kent, were silent. The Securitas depot burglary, which took place on the 21st or was it the 22nd of February 2006 in Tonbridge in Kent, and in which 56 million quid was stolen, about 35 million of which having never been recovered, led to the conviction of 8 men, including Paul Allen, aged 46 or 47 at the time of this recording, who, between them, got over 100 years inside. Notwithstanding, not only were neither the Ahearnes nor Daniel Kelly involved in that heist, none of the 8 who got caught first grasped on the others. Mr. Allen himself didn't get caught until 2009, but only ended up doing 6 years of his 18-year sentence, his release coming in 2016. And on the point of the missing millions that he and others stole, how do we reckon he was paying for his luxury East London rental home then? But yet, even though it doesn't look by any means as if the attempt on Mr. Allen's life had anything to do with the Securitas heist, a target Mr. Allen no less clearly was. And the men who came for Mr. Allen weren't reckless or impulsive. They were cold, disciplined and deeply embedded in organised crime. Daniel Kelly was a career criminal known for his reach beyond UK borders. Stewart and Louis Ahearne, brothers from South East London, had long been operating in the shadows. Weeks before the shooting, the trio had already proven what they were capable of. On the night of the 1st of June 2019, the trio broke into the Museum of Far Eastern Arts in Geneva, Switzerland. Wearing gloves, masks and forehead lamps, they used an ankle grinder, a crowbar and a sledgehammer to force the museum's doors. Once inside, they headed straight for a display labelled Room 3, which held some of the museum's most valuable artefacts. In under 5 minutes, they had smashed open display case 13 and escaped with 3 rare Ming Dynasty porcelain pieces, a delicate phoenix design bowl from the 14th century, a tiny chicken cup from the 15th century, and a pomegranate decorated bottle valued at nearly 2 million alone. In total, the haul was worth over 2.7 million quid. 2 weeks later, the group flew to Hong Kong in an attempt to sell the Phoenix Bowl at an auction house, but failed. Then, in London in October 2020, Stewart Ahearne was arrested during a sting operation at a central London hotel where he was trying to sell the stolen vase to an undercover police officer posing as a buyer. The police officer having posed as a buyer, that is, not Stewart, funnily enough. A subsequent search of Stewart Ahearne's home uncovered a fake passport in Stewart's name and a book on Ming Dynasty antiques. Both Ahearnes were subsequently extradited to Switzerland, convicted of aggravated theft, but then later returned to the UK to face far more serious charges, whose exact name I reckon you can guess. Before then, though, of course, on the 10th of July 2019, the night before their attempt on Mr. Allen's life, the 3 men went to a property in a gated community in Sevenoaks in Kent, fitted their Renault Captur hire car with a flashing blue light, presented themselves to the residents of the property in question as police officers, and, having duly been allowed into the property, stole handbags, designer bags and a quantity of cash. As regards the gang's murderous plans for Mr. Allen, their motive for which, to reiterate it, being a mystery to this very day, the men had long since planted none other than a GPS tracker on Allen's car, a black Mercedes, and synced it to an iPad. Every trip, every stop, every return home that their target made was logged on that iPad. When the man was inside, when he was alone, when he was out and how long he stayed out were all activities of his that were being monitored in real time without his even suspecting. That same iPad was later found at the bottom of the Thames and duly became a silent witness in court, a digital roadmap to a planned assassination. On the night of the 11th of July 2019, the trio left their home turf in Woolwich, South East London, and crossed the city under the cover of darkness. Their route took them through the Blackwall Tunnel, cutting north towards Woodford Green. It was a calculated journey, one that they'd made before, during their surveillance runs. Stewart Ahearne parked the car on Worcester Avenue, just behind Mr. Allen's home. While he stayed behind the wheel, acting as lookout and getaway driver, Daniel Kelly and Louis Ahearne slipped through a neighbouring garden. From this vantage point, they had a clear view of Paul Allen's back garden and, crucially, of his kitchen. Just after 11:09 p.m, they fired 6 rounds from their Glock handgun through the glass doors and windows of the kitchen. Allen had been standing in the kitchen. Of the 2 bullets that actually hit him, one caught his hand while the other sank into his neck and lodged itself near his spinal cord. As the man collapsed on the floor, Kelly and Louis quietly eased their way back through the garden before getting back into the waiting car, which soon had them well clear of the crime scene. Legend has it that the 6 gunshots coming from the Glock handgun were heard by pretty much the whole of Woodford Green. The police were, in fact, called by several local residents. In hospital, doctors were able to save Mr. Allen's life, but couldn't do the same for his spinal cord. The once massively feared cage fighter, who'd helped pull off the biggest cash robbery in British history, was now paralysed from the chest down and confined as such to a wheelchair. Let's keep in mind though that the Ahearne brothers, along with Daniel Kelly, wanted the man dead, and that is what they had tried to do. In this respect, Mr. Allen is arguably a very lucky man. When, on the 24th of March 2025 at the Old Bailey in London, Louis Ahearne, Stewart Ahearne and Daniel Kelly were all found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, Stewart Ahearne called out, somewhat bizarrely, to the jury, "You're only human. That is all I have to say about that." At the time of this recording, the 3 men were set to be sentenced on the 25th of April 2025. Reminds me of the sending down of either the Richardsons or the Krays, 2 sets of rival London gangsters from the 60s, in case you don't know, where the judge declared that society had earned a break from the offending of those vicious antagonists.
Hello, you Mr. Zou by any chance?
What's your name, sir? Zhenhao. Pardon? Zhenhao.
And your surname?
Yes,
Huh?
And your surname?
Family name, Zou.
Pardon?
Zou.
You got any ID on you at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you show me your ID please, just so we can confirm who you are? That doesn't. Is there anybody else in?
I saw it was done.
Sorry? Say that again?
I remember Mum's.
Okay, sir, I'm arresting you on suspicion of rape, okay? Because it is alleged that on the 14th of November last year, you have vaginally raped a female at this address, okay? You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Your arrest is necessary for a prompt and effective investigation, okay? Your time of let me finish. Your time of arrest is now 1:53. Come out so I can check the
just allow something cover here?
Can I
want a jacket or anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get that. If you shuffle out. Yeah, can you?
I'm going to search your search feed so we don't have anything sharp on you. Do you understand what's happening?
Rich, handsome and confident, 27-year-old Zhenhao Zou, sorry if I mispronounced that, was, as a PhD student at UCL, University College London, known for his vast intelligence and his commitment to his doctoral studies. To at least 10 women, though, he was known as their rapist, drugger and filmer, and when the videos showing Zou's disgusting acts against those 10 victims were shown in court, at least one juror cried, while certain others literally couldn't even look. Zou's arrest of January 2024 came, as I reckon you gathered, as a total shock to him, because the man had got away with doing what he did to at least 10 women over a period of 4 years, no less, 2019 to 2023. Growing up in Dongguan City, South China, near Hong Kong, Zou enjoyed, thanks to his parents' thriving property business, the privilege of financial wealth. In 2017, at 20, the man went to Queen's University, Belfast, Northern Ireland, to study mechanical engineering. 2 years later, after graduating, he moved over to London to study for a master's degree in his subject at UCL. The man bought Rolex watches, designer clothes, hair transplants and plastic surgery because he wanted to, and because, thanks to both the wealth and generosity of his parents, who literally threw money at him, he could. His 39th floor flat in a luxury high-rise block in Elephant and Castle, South London, cost £4,000 a month. In explanation to the landlord of why he wanted a highly soundproofed apartment, he said that he planned to throw parties on a regular basis and didn't want to disturb his neighbours. Parties aren't what the man feared would disturb his neighbours, of course, as I'm sure you can see. Zou meeting his victims through social media sites used by many Chinese people, including WeChat, and all his victims being of Chinese origin. When, after arresting Zou in January 2024, police raided the man's flat, they found the notorious date grape drug, GHB, which sends people into a state of virtual unconsciousness, rendering them as such wholly vulnerable. While also finding other drugs, including butanediol and ecstasy, police discovered numerous pipettes which the perpetrator had used to measure out doses of GHB and other dangerous substances before getting his victims to take them. 4 hidden cameras, some disguised as everyday objects like alarm clocks, were uncovered, while the perpetrator's phone was found to hold 1,277 videos, totalling over 6.5 terabytes of data and over 1,600 hours of viewing time, and showing the perpetrator drugging and graping his unconscious victims. It was, similarly, the numerous grape videos made by serial grapist Reynhard Sinaga, who preyed on young men outside nightclubs in Manchester, England, between 2017 and 2019 that secured that perpetrator's convictions. His 40-year prison term is a record for grape, just like the 40-year term of fellow fucked-up grapist Joseph McCann. Investigators soon discovered that Zou's offending had taken place not just in England, but also in his home country. In fact, 3 of his victims were from the UK, while the other 7 were from China. Moreover, Zou's obvious view of women as sexual objects for him to use as he saw fit had developed while he was a schoolboy. Former friends of his report of the obscene jokes about women that he used to make, and of his habit, on the occasion of parties, of always pressuring women to drink, personally mixing their drinks and forcing them to drink. When he went to bars or KTV lounges, his classmates had to physically step in on numerous occasions to stop him taking intoxicated women home. The man still sometimes succeeded in taking the woman in question home with him though, and God only knows how many of those women he essayed. Police found Zou's grape trophies. In a Fendi box in his flat, there was jewellery, clothing and other possessions of his victims. For the perpetrator, these were, as I just stated, grape mementos, items for him to view, touch and hold to trigger the memory of the acts of sexual aggression that he'd committed and which, for years, he believed he had got away with. On this point, I mentioned earlier that many jurors were visibly distressed by the grape videos that they had to watch. Zou, in contrast, couldn't get enough of them when, at the police station, police showed them to him. His outward calm, including moments when he casually sipped the water that he'd been given, was a highly disturbing response. On the inside, meanwhile, the man had to have been feeling both excitement and extreme pleasure at the videos.
This is Zou in custody being shown the footage that left a juror in tears when it was played in court. He has no such reaction here.
Zou said all the women concerned were consenting sexual partners. In court, meanwhile, the jury was shown a video portraying one woman referred to in the trial as Victim G, waking up from her drug-induced unconsciousness, finding Zou graping her, and immediately trying to fight him off while repeatedly begging him to stop. Further evidence came from 2 videos showing a woman referred to as Victim A, which offered a parallel scenario depicted in the video of Victim G, the woman waking up and immediately pleading with the perpetrator to stop essaying her. In the first video, Zou responds to her pleas by saying, quote, "Don't struggle, it's useless. The soundproofing here is very good," unquote. In the second video, the audio was missing at first, prompting the perpetrator to run his line of having the woman's consent for his intercourse with her. Unluckily for him, by the time of the trial, forensic technicians were able to retrieve the audio, and it of course showed that the woman was unconscious when the perpetrator began to essay her, which defeated the man's claim that he had her consent for his act. Zou, no less, full on, claiming that every month he would get at least 5 different women round to his flat and engage in a roleplay with them where they kept their eyes closed and lay still while he had intercourse with them. He insisted that the women always consented to both performing the roleplay and having it filmed since he paid them. Their drug use, furthermore, was entirely voluntary on their part, the money and gifts that he again gave them for that being why. Yeah, just wondering if having them trying to fight him off and begging him to stop when they regained consciousness was all part of the game. Anyway, when the police asked him if he enjoyed exerting control over women, the perpetrator smirked and said, quote, "I am very good in every way. I am better than others. I am an excellent person," unquote. Victim N, meanwhile, who gave evidence at the trial, was a Chinese student living in the UK. She met Zou in May 2023 when she asked him to help her with her maths homework. A few days later, she went to a party at a friend's place, which was just 2 floors above Zou's own apartment. Having somehow been able to introduce himself to N, Zou promptly lured her to his flat where he forced her to drink lots and lots. At one point, he handed her a massive glass of vodka and told her not to waste it. On being blocked by the perpetrator from escaping, N soon passed out on account of her alcohol consumption and her consumption of whatever substances Zou had measured into her drinks. In the video of his acts against the woman that the perpetrator subsequently made, the woman is seen struggling, screaming and trying to push the perpetrator away. Managing eventually, somehow, to escape Zou's grasp, the woman fled the apartment, even leaving her handbag behind, desperate as she was to get away from the perpetrator. When, the following day, she reported Zou to the police, due to her limited English and to her having no access to a translator, her statement wasn't clear enough, meaning that the police soon wrote her complaint off as an NFA, no further action. In response, the woman denounced the perpetrator on the Chinese version of Instagram. 8 months later, on coming across that very post, detectives got in touch with the woman to notify her that they had found videos on the perpetrator's phone showing her being drugged and raped. Also in response to N's post, another woman, victim L, came forward, and honestly, her story of having the perpetrator drug and rape her in his flat is almost a direct match with N's own. After a lengthy and gruelling trial, on March the 5th, 2025, the jury found Zou guilty of the following offences: 11 counts of rape, 3 counts of voyeurism, 10 counts of possessing extreme adult explicit content, 1 count of unlawful detention, 3 counts of possessing controlled substances with intent to commit a crime, and that is the sum total of the offences for which the perpetrator was convicted. On hearing the verdict, the judge of the trial warned Zou that he is in for an extremely lengthy prison stay. At the time of this recording, Zou's sentencing was set for June the 19th, 2025. At the conclusion of the perpetrator's trial, the police were already saying that the actual number of victims was most probably substantially higher than the 10 already established, 50 being the police's actual estimate. And sure enough, between the end of the trial and mid-April 2025, the time of this recording, another 23 women, no less, have come forward to file official complaints of rape against Zou.
You Mohammed? Yeah. Are you alright? How are you feeling?
Not what?
There's a bomb inside it, but it's not live. What is it? What's it made from?
Pressure cooker.
A pressure cooker. And what's in it?
Actually, it's not live. Gunpowder.
There's gunpowder in a pressure cooker. So it's pressure cooker with gunpowder inside it.
This is what?
It's a pressure cooker that's filled with gunpowder, apparently.
All because he couldn't be a nurse. You've just witnessed a section of the arrest of the 20th of January 2023 of 26-year-old married father of 2, Mohammed Farooq from Leeds, Yorkshire, North England, after he turned himself over to the police on changing his mind about blowing up St James's Hospital in Leeds because he hated his life, especially the fact that he had, several months before, failed to qualify as a nurse. In the early hours of Friday the 20th of January 2023, Farooq was arrested outside the ghetto wing of St James's Hospital in Leeds. He knew the hospital well and had been a clinical support worker there. He had with him an improvised explosive device, a bomb. He had created it from a pressure cooker, especially purchased for the purpose, and nearly 10 kilograms of explosive, which he'd extracted from £600 worth of fireworks. He'd been carrying it around in his car from mid-December of the previous year. He was also in possession of an imitation firearm, which he'd painted black to make it look more realistic. In the same bag as the bomb, he had a knife and black tape. From 2020 to 2022, he became radicalised, and that was actually something that he did all by himself. He turned himself into a supporter of Islamist extremism. He was disillusioned in his own life, both personally and professionally, after failing to achieve the necessary standard of work to become a nurse. He executed a plan of harassment of his colleagues at the hospital, and eventually he decided to commit acts of terrorism in this country by using explosives to cause death and or serious injury. In the 2 years leading up to the autumn of 2022, he variously engaged in researching topics such as violent jihad against unbelievers, the caliphate, primary explosives, improvised munitions, how to convert blank firing guns, Al-Qaeda, how to make anthrax, chemical nerve agents including sarin, an extremely toxic compound, and poisons, martyrdom, and the Finsbury Park mosque attack. Viewing anti-West propaganda videos, including from Islamic State and the hate preacher Anwar al-Awlaki, inciting violence against America. Downloading a munitions handbook and the anarchist cookbook. Trying to cover his tracks by downloading a VPN and the TOR network, which enables browsing of the dark web. He also searched for military-grade encryption software. Purchasing an imitation firearm as well as 2 gun holsters and blank firing ammunition, painting the gun to make it look more realistic, acquiring instructions for the preparation of an improvised explosive device, IED, from the Inspire magazine produced by Al-Qaeda and other places on the internet, researching fireworks shops in Leeds and purchasing a large metal pressure cooker, obtaining the ingredients of black powder explosive. From September 2022, he spent time off sick after being challenged about his misconduct towards colleagues, and he last worked at St James's Hospital before Christmas 2022. After that, until his arrest on the 20th of January 2023, he was deceiving his family, telling them he was working while in fact just not turning up at work. In November 2022, he downloaded a 62-page document written by Al-Qaeda's chief intelligence officer, which has the title Safety and Security Guidelines for Lone Wolf Mujahideen. He began to search for the Menwith Hill Royal Air Force Base near Harrogate, which provides support for UK and USA military. He then accessed a range of material, including TikTok videos that mention the base and referred to it being used by the United States for operations against Islamists in the Middle East, including an article stating that Islamic State had named RAF Menwith Hill as one of its targets for attack. He then made searches using the term ISIS Lone Wolf hit list. By December, he'd assembled all the components for the IED and built it following the instructions in the AQ Inspire magazine article, How to Make a Bomb in the Kitchen of Your Mum. On the 18th of December, he carried out 24 searches about the RAF base, including for the B6451, which runs alongside it. On Christmas Eve, he wrote a note on his phone which reads like a suicide martyrdom letter. In it, he said that one thing he wanted was to die with honour and courage. He referred to suffering in the Muslim world, many of his brothers, as he called them, being massacred, and his sisters, again as he called them, being held captive, and that it was time to stand up and fight back. His first known trip to Menwith Hill was on the 10th of January 2023. It's a highly secure location with a protective wire wall and not easily accessible. He drove around it and around the area for about 4 hours from 9 a.m. The second trip was late at night on the 18th of January, and he spent nearly 2 hours in the area, leaving at around 1:20 a.m. on the following day. Late at night on the 19th of January, he went to St James's Hospital despite having called in to say that he was sick and would not be attending for the 7:30 a.m. shift. Near the hospital, he downloaded a voice changer app and attempted to record a bomb warning. In each message recovered from his telephone, he said there was a bomb or a pressure cooker bomb on the ward and everyone should be evacuated. What was in his mind, of course, wasn't to save lives, but to attack and murder those being evacuated with the IED and knives that he had with him when he arrived shortly after recording the messages. He didn't send the audio messages, but at 11:45 p.m. he sent a text to a nurse colleague who worked on the same ward as him, J28, which said, quote, "I have placed a pressure cooker bomb on J28. It will detonate in 1 hour. Let's see how many lives you will save," unquote. He then sat in the hospital car park in his car with the bomb and the knives waiting for the evacuation to begin. Fortunately, the colleague didn't see the message for over an hour. There was no immediate evacuation and he wasn't able to achieve the movement of large numbers of vulnerable patients and staff out of the hospital. When evacuation did occur, it was contained within the hospital. At about 1:45 a.m, he went into the hospital, not toward J28, but to the Gletto wing, which houses other wards and the maternity services. He spent about 12 minutes inside. When he left the wing, a patient who was outside noticed him and began a conversation with him. Farooq was standing with the bomb in a black holdall, looking distressed. The name of the man who just randomly started talking to Farooq is Mr. Nathan Newby, and apparently his evidence was amongst the most remarkable that the court where Farooq was sentenced had ever heard. And it was that very conversation that Mr. Newby started making with Farooq that led Farooq to tell Mr. Newby about his intention to kill people at the hospital, and he showed Mr. Newby the bomb in his bag, and he also showed him the imitation firearm that he had in his jacket. He explained the significant blast radius that the IED would have. He said he was going to walk through the main doors to the wing, past the lifts to the canteen, where he would wait for all the staff to come and then detonate the bomb when the canteen was full of nurses and walk out. All the while that Farooq ranted about the hospital staff, Mr. Newby remained fully calm, and Farooq himself admitted that it was Mr. Newby's calm and polite conversation with him that talked him out of doing what he had planned to do, especially when Mr. Newby remarked that he, Farooq, should consider the effect of his planned actions on his own children. At 4:21 a.m, Farooq told Mr. Newby to call 999 and said that he should do so before he changed his mind. And Mr. Newby was very happy to do so, and he actually used Farooq's phone to do so. And he told the police that he was with someone who was very upset and feeling like killing everyone. Not long after that, Farooq was arrested by armed police. Subsequent searches revealed that although Farooq had been living with his parents, his wife and his 2 children, during this period he was spending a lot of time alone in his car. This lifestyle was coming to a necessary end because the lease had expired, and by January the car company was seeking to repossess it. As such, his deception about going to work would most likely have been discovered. The pressure cooker bomb was examined by an expert and it was viable. Farooq had put nearly 10 kilograms of low explosive mix removed from fireworks inside it, with a length of fuse running through one of the pressure valves to a secondary charge made from a bundle of fuses. A match was taped to the cooker. When detonated, the device would have caused a significant explosion, with metal fragments being ejected indiscriminately at high speed, with the potential to cause death to those in proximity. He'd gone to considerable effort to prepare the IED in line with the instructions in the Illustrated Inspire magazine article, experimenting with different constituent parts. Several hundred firework tubes were required, and each had to be emptied into the pressure cooker at a risk to Farooq himself, especially as it accumulated. He had persisted until the gunpowder almost filled the pressure cooker and could easily have been ignited by a match travelling along the fuse. The expert evidence was that because fuses burn at different times, it's possible that when ignited, the device could have exploded before Farooq himself would have been able to make his escape. In March 2025, Farooq, the stupid, twisted fucker, got 37 years. I think you'll agree with me, on the other hand, when I say that Mr. Nathan Newby deserves a medal. 3.3 million quid. That's the estimated amount that triple murderer and triple whole life order prisoner, 26-year-old Kyle Clifford, is expected to cost the taxpayer over the next 60 years. At the time of this recording, this makes the fucker the most expensive prisoner in the UK. Clifford's failed suicide attempt, which he made just moments before his arrest in July 2024 for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, her mother and her sister, and which left him paralysed from the chest down, means for a start that in prison, where he will be for the rest of his fucked up life, he will need a specially adapted cell to accommodate his wheelchair. There will be the cost of the employees that will be taking him to the toilet and washing him, the cost of the nurses, the doctors, the physiotherapists and the occupational therapists that he will need as well. As regards nurses, they will probably be the ones to be taking the killer from day to day for a shit and scrubbing him clean. Instead of costing the taxpayer the already pretty shocking £55,000 a year that the average prisoner costs, Clifford, who caused his physical disability, as I say, by shooting himself with the same crossbow that he used to commit 2 of his 3 brutal murders, is set to cost at least twice that. Clifford committed his triple murder on the 9th of July 2024. But before he perpetrated those 3 killings, he already had murder in his family. In 2017, Bradley Clifford, Kyle Clifford's brother, who was then aged 23, punched as many as 9 times a young man who, having just been sent flying from the pillion seat of a motorbike, which had just been deliberately hit by a car, was lying on the road with catastrophic injuries. As he savagely pounded the youth with his fists, Bradley Clifford raged at the man that he deserved the beating. The attacker was subsequently sentenced to 23 years for murder, 18-year-old Sobhan Khan having later succumbed to his many serious injuries, his motorbike catastrophe, like his beating, having come from Bradley Clifford. To the perpetrator, you see, for breaking the wing mirror of his beloved red Ford Mustang, Mr. Khan had to die. That was his reason for ending the young man's life. You might be inclined to forgive the addiction to videos showing extreme violence that Kyle Clifford developed when he became a trooper in the Queen's Dragon Guards, his very willingness to lay down his life for his country being the reason for your said inclination for forgiveness. Entering into military service is what Kyle Clifford did shortly after his brother's incarceration, and you may be as surprised as I was to learn that having such a close connection to a murderer was no barrier to joining the army. Things may or may not have since changed. Likewise, given the man's willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice for his country, we may well choose to overlook the fact that none of his fellow soldiers liked him. Or we could discover the truth to the man's army career and understand what a sham it actually was.
You have been referred to at times as a former soldier. In many cases that would serve as significant mitigation. Not so in your case, however, as your 2 years in the army included 286 days at home claiming to be ill. You never saw active service, and your utility to the armed forces can be gleaned in a parting comment from your commanding officer that, quote, his character is wholly unsuited to military employment, and he has no care nor concern beyond himself.
In June 2024, after an 18-month relationship with Clifford, in which the man had quickly revealed himself as a bully, a racist, a misogynist and a serial cheat, Louise Hunt, a 25-year-old owner of a dog grooming business and daughter of BBC racing commentator John Hunt, dumped the man. This would have come as a huge relief to Louise's family, who had noticed very early on Clifford's controlling and unreasonable behaviour towards Louise, as well as his rudeness and his arrogance. While Louise and her family were aware from the off of the murder conviction of Clifford's brother, it never crossed their mind for a minute that, as a result of being dumped by Louise, Clifford would arm himself with a crossbow and a kitchen knife and then drive to the Hunt home in Bushey, southeast England, ensure that his ex-girlfriend's father was out because he would never have let Clifford in, and then trick Louise's mother into letting him in, enabling him to unalive her, her daughter Louise and her daughter Hannah, aged 28. This is precisely what unravelled on the afternoon of the 9th of July 2024. Clifford having told Louise's mother, Carol, when she answered the door to him, that he just wanted to return some of Louise's belongings and that he was grateful to have ever been accepted into their family. Seconds after Carol let him in, she was lying on the floor, dying from the many stab wounds that Clifford had inflicted on her with the kitchen knife that he had brought with him. Clifford's subsequent grape of Louise was his way of hurting and dominating her before unaliving her, which he did with his crossbow after keeping her tied up with duct tape for around 2 hours, just as her sister was approaching the house. In court, the judge observed that Louise would most probably have come to realise before she was unalived that Clifford had already unalived her mother, Louise having been working from a building out in the garden when that unaliving took place and having been as such wholly oblivious to it. When, at around 6:54 p.m. that evening, Clifford left the house, Hannah Hunt, who Clifford had just fatally shot with his crossbow, was able to call the emergency services. On arriving, however, they found Hannah unconscious and were sadly unable to revive her. The following day, after a 22-hour manhunt, Clifford was located at a cemetery in the Lavender Gardens area of Enfield, North London. As officers approached the spot in the undergrowth where he was hiding, the man shot himself in the chest with his crossbow. This severed his vital spinal tendons, leaving him paralysed from the chest down. The aim of his act, though, was of course to end his life. However, as we can see, for all the perpetrator's skill at unaliving 3 defenceless and wholly innocent women with total savagery, when it came to unaliving himself, the fucker was totally fucking inept. During his 10-week hospital stay, the man required a 24-hour police guard. While he lay in hospital, the only comments he made were "sorry" and "what I have done is atrocious." For all this apparent remorse, however, when he was finally fit to give an interview, he went no comment all the way through.
Do you accept, Kyle, that based on the evidence, that this is a premeditated murder of 3 people?
No comment.
Do you accept that you have meticulously planned this murder from the moment that you split up Louise?
No comment.
From the moment that she sent you that text message at the end of June, you began to plan her murder? Yes?
No comment.
At the last minute, Clifford changed his plea from not guilty to guilty as charged. Normally, pleading guilty gets a defendant a shorter sentence than the one that they would have got if they'd gone to trial and been found guilty. Clifford got 3 whole life orders, the judge duly condemning the man as a savage, self-entitled dick.
The evidence I have heard shows you to be a jealous man, soaked in self-pity, a man who holds women in utter contempt. This is no occasion to subject the family and friends of your victims to any delay or suspense. I therefore make clear at once that for each of these 3 murders, the sentence will be one of life imprisonment with a whole life order. That means a sentence from which you will never be released.
His sentencing took place in March 2025. From being a family of 5, the Hunt family is now reduced to a father and a daughter only, there being, as you can see, a 3rd daughter. These are the words of the father, John, in his victim impact statement.
When I was first invited to provide a victim impact statement, I initially misunderstood its purpose. Do I really need to detail the impact of having 3/4 of my family murdered? He went on, whatever sentence you're about to receive, whatever misery lies ahead for you in the next 60 years, remember that after your days on earth are done, on your dying day there will be no release for you, Kyle. The screams of hell, Kyle, I can hear them faintly now. They're going to roll the red carpet out for you.
Kyle Clifford became a triple murderer just because he got dumped. Nicholas Prospers is the story of an 18-year-old man who slaughtered his family because of his obsession with a video game character. To the outside world, the Prosper family from Luton, UK, seemed like a typical loving household. Juliana Prosper, the mother, was 48 years old and she was well known in her community. She worked at a local Sainsbury's supermarket and was described by those who knew her as a devoted and caring mother. Outside of her job, Juliana was an athlete, often participating in community events and volunteering for various charities. She was deeply involved in helping others, always thinking of ways to support her family and the people around her. Juliana's generous spirit made her a beloved figure in her neighbourhood. Juliana had 3 children, each with a distinct personality and each with a future that seemed bright. Their son, Kyle, 16 years old, was a student at Cardinal Newman Catholic School. He was an active, creative young man involved in sports like football and boxing. His friends remember him as someone who was always up for a laugh and genuinely kind-hearted. Kyle had also begun to gain some attention on TikTok, where his creative side was shining through, and it was clear that he had potential in the growing world of social media. Giselle, the youngest daughter at 13, was a student at Lehman High School. She was a model pupil, excelling in her classes, and her teachers often spoke highly of her academic performance. Those who knew Giselle described her as having a contagious smile and a kind heart. She treasured her family, particularly her elder brothers, and seemed to bring joy to everyone she met. To her friends and peers, she was known as a sweet and caring person, someone who always made those around her feel good. Lastly, the father, Ray Prosper, didn't live with the rest of his family, and in fact he and the children's mother had split up when Nicholas Prosper was 8 years old. However, he saw his children regularly, he lived quite close by, and he got on with all of them. He had lots and lots of love for them all. Then there was Nicholas, the eldest child at 18. Unlike his siblings, Nicholas didn't seem to fit the same mould as the rest of the family. He was more reserved and quiet and often kept to himself. Friends and family had noticed his increasingly strange behaviour and mood changes, which led to growing concern. Nicholas had been struggling with mental health issues for some time, though the specifics of his condition weren't clear to those around him, and something that I can't tell you is what triggered those mental health issues. In any event, the family had attempted to seek help for Nicholas, but it became apparent that whatever assistance he received wasn't enough to address his deepening issues. As Nicholas grew more isolated, he turned to the internet to express himself and to find a sense of belonging. Unfortunately, instead of seeking positive connections, he became drawn to dark, violent corners of the online world. He regularly participated in online communities that glorified death, violence, and controversial topics. These online communities included the now banned subreddit called Watch People D-Bleep I-Bleep-E. Sorry, but God knows what rules YouTube implements these days. I don't want this video to be demonetised. Anyway, the said subreddit, along with other shock sites, hosted graphic and disturbing content, including real-life footage of fatal accidents, executions, and violent crimes. Nicholas frequently posted comments on these platforms, many of which were deeply troubling and reflected a growing desensitisation to violence and human suffering. Nicholas's comments often displayed a fascination with death and extreme violence, and it makes sense considering what sorts of fucked up online communities he visited. Nicholas was particularly interested in videos that depicted women or children as victims, and his remarks were increasingly hateful and derogatory, especially towards women. He viewed all women through a lens of contempt, frequently dismissing them as feminists, regardless of the context, and belittling their suffering or deaths with crude and misogynistic comments. These disturbing patterns of behaviour only intensified over time as he became more deeply ingrained in these violent online communities. Now, in addition to Nicholas's growing obsession with violence, Nicholas began expressing disturbing views about children. On multiple occasions, for instance, he posted inflammatory remarks defending PDF files, let's just say. And honestly, I'm not getting into any more detail about that. Nicholas's obsession with the Walking Dead video games, particularly the character Clementine, played a pivotal role in his deteriorating mental state. For Nicholas, The Walking Dead was not just an ordinary game, but a source of deep emotional attachment that went far beyond typical fandom. Nicholas's fixation on Clementine, a young girl who serves as one of the main protagonists in the game series, was unusual and disturbing in its intensity. Over time, this attachment grew into what can only be described as an unhealthy obsession, and I have to say that is putting it mildly. In the Walking Dead video games, players make choices that affect the whole storyline and shape the development of the characters. Clementine, who first appears as a vulnerable child under the care of another character, eventually grows into a strong and resilient survivor in a post-apocalyptic world filled with danger and moral challenges. Nicholas connected with Clementine on a personal level, or at least he thought he did, viewing her not just as a fictitious character, but as a real person with whom he had a deep spiritual bond. And if you're all sitting there thinking, but I thought he thought all women were worthless bastards who deserved to suffer and die, so why is he fantasizing about this Clementine who he clearly sees as a real person? You're not the only one. Anyway, this apparent connection between Nicholas and this totally non-real person of Clementine went so far that Nicholas began to see Clementine as some kind of religious figure, someone who guided and inspired him, much like a deity or a prophet might inspire a follower. For Nicholas, Clementine represented purity, innocence and strength in the face of adversity. He spoke of her in near reverent terms, believing that he was chosen by her, as if he had some divine connection to her world. He used her image as his profile picture on various social media platforms and even created entire Pinterest boards dedicated to collecting images of the character. His admiration for Clementine morphed into a near worship, and he would often reference her in his online posts, speaking of her as if, as I say, she were a real person guiding his life. In one of his more bizarre posts, Nicholas expressed a desire to either travel to Clementine's universe or somehow become a fanboy version of her. Femme there is spelled F-E-M-M-E, which means woman in French. Nicholas wanted to protect Clementine, his beloved, at all costs, and this very protective instinct towards Clementine warped into an extreme and almost fanatical, never mind the almost, and totally fanatical need to preserve her character from any perceived harm, even within the fictitious confines of the game. Nicholas's obsession with Clementine wasn't limited to his private thoughts. He took it a step further by introducing the Walking Dead games to his younger sister Giselle. Given his strong attachment to the game, he likely wanted to share what he viewed as an important part of his life with his sibling. However, his expectations for how Giselle would interact with the game and its characters were far from reasonable. Nicholas wanted Giselle to experience the game in the exact same way that he did, and to make the same decisions that he believed were in Clementine's best interests. During one of their playthroughs of the game, Nicholas's expectations for how Giselle would play were shattered. As I mentioned earlier, in The Walking Dead there are several pivotal moments where players can make choices that affect the storyline. In two particular scenes, the player is given the option to kill human characters in front of Clementine. While these decisions are complex and emotionally charged, they don't physically harm Clementine, but they do influence her emotional state and how she views the world around her. Nicholas, who saw himself as Clementine's protector, believed that making certain choices would traumatise her and ruin her character development. When Giselle made decisions that Nicholas disagreed with, specifically choosing to kill characters in front of Clementine, Nicholas was enraged. To him, these decisions were not just poor choices in the game, but a direct affront to Clementine's well-being and to Clementine herself. Nicholas couldn't separate the fictional narrative from reality, and he saw Giselle's choices as personally harmful to Clementine, which, in Nicholas's mind, justified his anger. From that point forward, Nicholas harboured a growing resentment towards Giselle. What may have seemed like a trivial disagreement over a video game to outsiders was, for Nicholas, a deeply personal and emotional betrayal, and he never let go of the anger that this caused him. In the days before his 3 murders, Nicholas's behaviour became even more disturbing. He isolated himself further from his family, spending hours locked in his room or absorbed in his online world. On the night before the murders, Nicholas set up a webcam and recorded a video. In it, he ranted about the choices that his sister Giselle had made in the Walking Dead game, and he specifically mentioned his plan to mutilate her face because of the wrong decisions that she'd made, according to him.
June 30th, my sister decided to make the only correct choices in episode 1 of season 1 of the Walking Dead games, and for that her face will be mutilated further than necessary.
In the early hours of September the 13th, 2024, Nicholas put his deadly, vengeful plan into action. The day before, Nicholas had paid 650 quid for the shotgun that he was about to use to massacre his family. He had also used a fake licence for the transaction, the seller though being a legal firearms dealer.
Forging a firearms licence, this was the man he duped into selling him a gun before he tried to put his plan into action.
Armed with the illegally obtained shotgun, he approached his family. It was around 5:30 in the morning when the confrontation began. According to reports, he shot and killed his mother, Juliana, first. Then he turned the gun on his sister Giselle and on his brother Kyle, fatally wounding both.
Say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something later on in court.
It's not murder.
Yes, we've got a male here, he's presented himself to us. Can we just get another unit down here, please?
He's saying it's not murder, but it was. This teenage boy had killed his mother and siblings, shooting Juliana Falcon, 13-year-old Giselle Prosper and 16-year-old Kyle Prosper at their home nearby. He'd stabbed Kyle too, 100 times.
Nicholas had taken the lives of 3 members of his family, and in his mind it was all justified by the anger and resentment that he had built up inside of himself over the preceding months. After committing the murders, Nicholas fled the scene on foot, leaving the shotgun behind. In his escape, he grabbed several kitchen knives in order to slaughter at least 30 pupils from his former primary school. Having long since taken inspiration from the infamous Sandy Hook massacre that unravelled over in the US in 2012, you see, Nicholas had been planning to commit a school massacre of his own in order to, likewise, become infamous and hated.
This video shows him acting out a shooting with a piece of wood. Prosper had withdrawn from his family after leaving school. He spent his life online. They had no clue he was obsessed with mass shootings.
Police were rapidly alerted to the shooting by Nicholas's neighbours, although many of them believed that the noise was just a car backfiring. Upon arriving, the police found the bodies of Juliana, Kyle and Giselle, along with the abandoned shotgun. Realising the gravity of the situation, they began an immediate search for Nicholas, who was still on the run. As the police search continued, Nicholas made one final attempt to explain his actions. He uploaded a video to a file-sharing site detailing his twisted reasoning for the murders, once again blaming Giselle's in-game choices in The Walking Dead and expressing his frustration with his family. He then posted the link to this video on his personal Facebook page, which only added to the shock and horror of those who knew his family. Just hours after the murders, at around 6:22 a.m, in fact less than an hour after the murders took place, Nicholas was located by police on Birmingham Road, not far from the family home and en route to his former primary school. He was casually strolling down the street with his massive haul of kitchen knives. Fortunately, the police were able to apprehend Nicholas without incident, bringing the manhunt to an end. Nicholas was taken into custody, where he was charged with the murders of his mother, his sister and his brother. In addition, he faced charges related to the illegal possession of the shotgun and carrying the kitchen knives in public.
Did you kill them?
No comments.
Police got called there to a disturbance and found your mum, brother and sister dead. Explain to me what happened.
No comments.
Did you kill your mum, brother and sister?
No comments.
Is it your shotgun?
No comments.
Is that the shotgun that was used to kill your mum and your brother and sister?
No comments.
I mean, I can confirm that this knife was taken from you by police officers, okay?
No comment.
Why did you have that knife in your pocket?
No comment.
It's obviously covered in blood. Whose blood is that?
No comment.
Have you stabbed someone with that knife?
No comment.
When police got there and found your mum, your brother and your sister, on your mum, or right next to her, is a book called How to Kill Your Family. Have you ever seen a book with a cover like that at your home address?
No comment.
Did it belong to you?
No comment.
Or did it belong to someone else living there?
No comment.
Have you ever touched that book? Because it was found right next to your mum.
No comment.
Was it just a coincidence that your mum fell where that book was?
No comment.
Have you read that book?
No comment.
Book with that title was right next to your mum. Has it got any significance?
No comment.
Have you been planning how to kill your family?
No comment.
Did you get any tips from that book?
No comment.
The emotional weight, if you like, of the proceedings became especially clear when Nicholas's father, Ray Prosper, stood in the gallery in court. Despite the unimaginable grief and horror of losing 2 of his 3 children, as well as the mother of his children, at the hands of another of his children, Ray expressed a deep love for Nicholas, as well as total forgiveness for him, calling out to him, "I still love you, son. It's not your fault, okay?" Having pled guilty to the murders as well as to the other charges mentioned, Nicholas was, in March 2025, forced into court for his sentencing. He had wanted to just stay in his cell instead. He then failed to stand up when the judge, Justice Chima Grubb, ordered him to do so, Nicholas having chosen beforehand to spend the whole hearing with his head bowed and with his fingers in his ears.
Didn't want to be in the 6th form and were angry that your mother made you go. She had noticed you were withdrawn at home, just as at school. Your parents agreed with a referral to the local child and adolescent mental health services team, but nothing came of it. Although autism was suspected and you seemed to be overwhelmed by social interaction and uncooperative in lessons, you resisted assessment or intervention. You were asked to leave school in March 2023. From then until September 2024, you existed in an online world, choosing little real-life contact with others apart from attending a gym and working part-time, stacking supermarket shelves for a few months. Your internet activity has been analysed. You are deeply fascinated by notorious murderers, perpetrators of mass school shootings around the world, and this. You collected images of a 6-year-old girl, C, one of the victims of the Sandy Hook school massacre, photographs of 2 nearby primary schools, and over 200 images and videos of children. 19 of these were of the most serious kind, Category A, depicting the rape of children. You recorded audio files discussing topics such as necrophilia, the 6-year-old victim C, and a computer game called The Walking Dead. On the 13th of September 2023, exactly 1 year before the murders, you phoned St. Joseph's Catholic Primary School, which you had attended happily, to find out the daily timetable and movements of the children. You carried out reconnaissance at the school and captured images of the staff and pupils from the school's website. In April 2024, you put together a curated outfit made up of black and yellow clothing, a yellow bucket hat, and shoes with yellow soles. That summer, you obtained the manifestos of Anders Breivik, who killed 77 people in Norway in 2011, and Christopher Dorner, an ex-police officer who killed several people in California in 2013. As the date drew near, you even searched for the weather forecast for Friday the 13th of September. Having taken possession of the shotgun and cartridges on the 12th of September, you spent the rest of the day reading about the impact of shotgun injuries to the neck. This was the means by which you intended to kill yourself after the school shooting. Into the following morning, as usual, you were researching Nadia, you research Sarah Everard, and your usual diet of mass shootings. From 4:11 a.m. for half an hour, you watched extreme animated pornography. At 4:42, the last images you looked at were of school massacres, including from the Columbine High School in 1999. Between then and 5:33 a.m., when you left the tower block, neighbours heard a serious disturbance in your 8th floor flat. Later it was established that you were disturbed by your mother, who realised that something was terribly wrong, and her intervention forced you to act earlier than you had intended. From extrinsic evidence, such as the scenes of crime examination of the flat, the evidence of neighbours, the pathology, together with some of your own accounts, the sequence appears to be that when your mother realised you had a gun, she struggled with you before you shot her in the head at very close range in the hallway. You placed a novel with the title How to Kill Your Family on her legs. Your little sister Giselle woke up. She put on her glasses and you fired a shot at her from a distance which grazed the back of her head. The terrified girl ran to hide in the living room and tried to conceal herself. You pursued her and inflicted an immediately fatal contact shot to her right eye. Your brother also woke and tried to seek refuge in the kitchen and protect himself with a knife. It was an unequal contest. You shot him in the chest from a distance, but then, while he was still alive and moving, stabbed and slashed him more than 100 times to his head, face, neck, torso and limbs, while he pleaded with you not to kill him. Plainly, these murders were not intrinsic to carrying out a school shooting, but they were part of your plan, and the boy you idolised, Adam Lanza, shot his mother while she was in bed before driving her car to the Sandy Hook Elementary School. You made no comment in interview, but later gave a mental health nurse who was assessing you in custody some further details, including that you had planned for a year to kill 34 people, ending in your own suicide. 30 of them were to be school children aged 4 or 5. The year before, a plan to rob a gun seller had failed, and so you took steps to acquire a firearm by deception. You wanted to cause the biggest massacre in the 21st century, as there had not been one. Your mother, waking up at about 4:50, had triggered your activity earlier. You wished you had killed more.
A few days before Nicholas's sentencing, 26-year-old Kyle Clifford, who, in July 2024, slaughtered his ex-girlfriend, her sister and her mother, all because his ex-girlfriend, Louise Hunt, dumped him, got 3 whole life orders. As such, many of us were gutted when, for his own triple murder, Nicholas didn't even get 1 whole life order. Instead, on the 18th of March 2025, he got 49 years. He can apply for parole when he's 67 or 68, or he can do us all a favour and just drop dead now. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.